never been easier to create responsive layouts that look beautiful on every screen. In this 3-part mini-series, I'll be showing you how to build this front-end mentor project from scratch. In this video, I'll be using grid and subgrid to create the hero section. So if you're ready, fire up your favorite editor and let's code. Inside the main tag, I'll add a div with a class of hero. The hero consists of 2 parts, a feature section and a primary aside. I'll add a class for each. I'll add an h2 to the section and give it the screen reader only class we created in the previous video. This will hide it from view, but keep it accessible to screen readers. Since the design specifies different images for mobile and desktop views, I'll use the picture element to switch between the 2 images based on the viewport width. To do this, I'll add an image tag and specify the desktop image as the source. Since the image is purely decoration, I'll leave the alt attribute empty to hide the image from screen readers. Next, I'll add the source tag and set the source set attribute to the mobile image. Using the media attribute, I can query the viewport width to show the mobile version when the viewport is less than 700 pixels. If I adjust the size of the viewport, I can see both versions of the image. Then I'll add the article heading, paragraph text, and read more link. I'll wrap the text and link in a div and give it a class of feature text. This will help with styling later on. Inside the primary aside, I'll add the heading and 3 article tags, each with their own link and paragraph. I'll wrap all 3 articles in a div for styling later on. Now that the HTML is in, let's move on to the CSS. For this project, I'll be writing my styles using the new CSS nesting feature. I find it helps organize my styles and reduces the amount of class names I have to come up with. Let me know in the comments if you've been using this feature too. Starting with the typography, I'll give the feature H3 a font size and weight. I've set up both as custom properties so I can easily reference them while I write. For the font sizes, I use the clamp function to specify a minimum, maximum, and preferred font size. This way, the text size will grow and shrink with the viewport. While I'm here, I'll add some margin to the bottom of the heading. I'm using M's so that the margin will change as the font size changes. Next, I'll add a font size for the feature text and restrict its width to 60 characters. For the primary aside heading, I'll change the font size and weight and give it a color of orange. I'll also specify a font size and color for each article inside the primary aside. And while I'm here, I'll add some padding to the top of each. I'll increase the font size for the article links and give them a heavier font weight. I'll also change their color to white. The design specifies a hover style for these links, so I'll add those and focus styles too. Next, I'll add some styles for the button. First, I'll add a background and some padding. Since I'm styling an anchor element to look like a button, and anchor elements are inline by default, adding the padding has caused some overlap of the paragraph above. To fix this, I'll change its display to inline block. Next, I'll add some space between the anchor and the paragraph and match its typography to the design specs. The design also specifies a hover state, so I'll add that and a focus state as well. Lastly, I'll give the image a bit of margin to finish out this section. For the primary aside, I'll give it a background color and some padding. I'll add margin to the bottom of each article paragraph and create the separator by selecting every article except the last child and adding a bottom border. I'll also add top and bottom padding to the first 2 articles. The page is really starting to come together. Next, we'll style the mobile layout. To start, I'll be creating a 5-column grid. I'll take a similar approach to the layout for the header. The 2 outer columns will act as margins, while the 3 inner columns will hold the content. Check the description for links to part 1 of this series where I build out the header and navigation section. To set up the grid, I'll add display grid to the hero. I use grid template columns to specify the sizing for each column. I'll give the 2 outer columns a minimum size of 1 rem and a maximum size of 1 FR, or 1 fraction of the total available space. According to the design specs, the desktop view is considered to be 1440 pixels wide, or 90 rem. So this will be the maximum allowed width for the content. Because the feature section takes up more space than the primary aside, I'll assign a max size of 32.5 rem for the second and third columns, and 25 rem to the fourth. All 3 columns get a minimum size of 0. Now I can place both the feature and the aside into the grid columns from lines 2 to 5. I'll also add some margin to space things out a bit. And that's the mobile layout complete. Let's move on to the desktop layout. Inside my media query, I'll place the feature in the grid columns between lines 2 to 4. I'll also place the primary side in the grid columns between lines 4 to 5. Things are really shaping up, but the design requires the feature title, text, and button to be in 2 columns. To achieve this, I'll use subgrid. It's possible to nest one grid inside the other, but I want to take advantage of the grid we already set up for the hero section. Since the feature section is itself a grid item, I can tell it to use the tracks defined on the parent by setting the value of grid template columns to subgrid. Then I'll define the roads. The first will be 500 pixels, and the second, 1 FR. If I take a look in DevTools, I can see that the subgrid is sharing its first, second, and third grid lines with the hero's second, third, and fourth. So the picture element will live in the grid columns between lines 1 and 3, and the grid rows between lines 1 and 2. The other 2 items will fall into place by default. To make sure the image takes up the height of the grid cell, I'll add height 100% and object fit cover. Lastly, I'll add margin to the right side of the feature section to space things out a bit. I'll also remove the bottom margin from the H3 and text so that they better align with the bottom of the aside. Finally, I'll add margin top to both so that there is space between them and the image above. And there it is! The hero portion of this page is complete. Grid makes it super easy to create responsive layouts that look great on every viewport. And with subgrid, we can build intricate layouts with ease. Stay tuned for part 3 of this series where we explore the collapsing grid. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more CSS builds. Until next time, happy coding!